Jai Radha Madhava Jai Kunja Bihari Gopijana Ballabha Grivadari Jaya Grivadari Gopijana Ballabha Grivadari Jaya Grivadari Sodanandana Rajadana Ranjana Jaya Brajadana Ranjana Yasodanandana Rajadana Ranjana Jaya Brajadana Ranjana Yamunadira Varatari Jaya Kunja Bihari Yamunadira Varatari Jaya Kunja Bihari Yamunadira Varachari Jaya Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Brahmadakacharya Asadhara Sadushi Shiman His Divine Grace Shalasi Bhaktivinoda Samaraj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Gaur Brahmanande Hariva Slava Zabrani Bhakta Slava Shri Guru Shri Grangi Nectar of Instruction, text number 7. Om Agyanatimanandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chaksurmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam yena bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Pandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuddha Parakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagridatam Sahagana Raganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Pradina Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shiva Sakanzvitamscha Hey Krishna Karna Sindho Dinabando Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Prishubhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Panchakapa Jubhyascha Kripa Sinubhyevacha Patitanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Pranitananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya So this is the Nectar of Instruction, text number 7. I'm just going to read because we don't have that much time, I'm just going to read the Sanskrit and the translation and the first paragraph. Anurinam kalasaiva jushta Swadvikramad bhavati tad gadamulahantri. The holy name, character, pastimes, and activities of Krishna are all transcendently sweet like sugar candy. Although the tongue of one afflicted by the jaundice of avidya, ignorance, cannot relish anything sweet, it is wonderful that by simply carefully chanting these sweet names every day, a natural relish awakens within his tongue, and his disease is gradually destroyed at the root. Purport. Everything's going all right? Do we have our translation going on properly? Anyone here speaks Russian? Someone can translate for Ananda Priya? Is the translation going on? Hare Krishna. So this is Srila Prabhupada's purport. The holy name of Lord Krishna, his quality, pastimes, and so forth, are all the nature of the absolute truth, beauty, and bliss. Naturally, they are very sweet, like sugar candy, which appeals to everyone. Nescience, however, is compared to the disease called jaundice, which is caused by bilious secretions. Attacked by jaundice, the tongue of a diseased person cannot palatably relish sugar candy. Rather, the person with jaundice considers something sweet to taste very bitter. Avidya, ignorance, similarly perverts the ability to relish the transcendently palatable name, quality, form, and pastimes of Krishna. Despite this disease, if one with great care and attention takes the Krishna consciousness, chanting the holy name and hearing Krishna's transcendental pastimes, his ignorance will be destroyed and his tongue enabled to taste the sweetness of the transcendental nature of Krishna and his paraphernalia. Such a recovery of spiritual health is possible only by the regular cultivation of Krishna consciousness. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutaya Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswatam Deve Gauravani Vicharane Nirvishesha Srinivadi Paskadyade Satarne. Since we're talking about the this Holy Name Festival, I'll tell about some of my experiences from the beginning of my association with the devotees. This is starting back. Actually, I physically met Prabhupada in 1969, although I was already initiated. And I had my own set of conceptions about what Krishna consciousness was. Some of them were quite accurate, because somehow or another, as I explained, I went from completely material consciousness, or I mean as much as the modern person has consciousness, and then suddenly Krishna just changed my consciousness one day, and I realized that the purpose of life is to discover the absolute truth. It wasn't drugs or anything like that. It was just some previous karma. And so when I went from 0 rounds to 25 rounds right away, and then as soon as I started to chant, there was all kinds of, we could say, mystical things that happened to me. And then within a few months, every time I chanted Hare Krishna, I could actually feel Krishna's presence. And how did I know if I was feeling Krishna's presence, or Balaram's presence, or Subhadra Devi's presence? Because it was the nature of transcendental bliss. Things are actually quite simple, because as I was really realizing a little bit yesterday, Krishna just gave me the realization that actually everyone is made out of only 3 things. We're quite simple, all of us. We're all made of Sat, Chit, and Ananda. We're all made out of bliss, consciousness, eternally. So we can't change that. If you don't like being made out of bliss, knowledge, eternity, there's nothing you can do about it. Just who you are. So out of the 3, we're eternal. We don't have to try to be eternal. It's not like you have to go to school to learn how to be eternal. And as far as knowledge, well, the only real knowledge is to become conscious of Krishna. Jnanam gayam ganam gamyam riddhi sarvasya vishtitam. I am knowledge, I am the source of knowledge. I am jnanam gayam ganam gamyam riddhi sarvasya vishtitam. I am knowledge, I am the object of knowledge, I am the source of knowledge, I am seated in everyone's heart. Jnanam gayam ganam gamyam riddhi sarvasya vishtitam. Yeah. So Krishna is knowledge. And knowledge means bliss. Spiritual world, everyone's conscious, fully conscious, ever growing more and more conscious, and they're just becoming more and more conscious of bliss and love. So that's the spiritual world. So, besides the fact that, well, you know, the deities weren't just objects of statues to me, they were persons when gradually they revealed themselves. So I had no problem chanting my rounds at that time, because it was just getting nicer and nicer. I had no problem going to the temple, because every time I went to the temple, or even if I wasn't in the temple, but feeling the deity's presence was just so pleasurable. Although I realized at the same time I wasn't eligible for that state of consciousness, but I realized it was just some gift that Krishna was giving me. In any case, some of the things that I learned, because at that time we were very inventive, just like in modern ISKCON, we've become very inventive. Everyone, when Prabhupada was here, there was one standard of how to do everything. Although there was a lot of Prabhupada said, but ultimately Prabhupada was there to ask him if he said it, and you could see what he was doing also if you had the fortune of having his physical association. So now we don't perhaps have his physical association, but we do have his videos, so they can be confirmed by his recordings, his videos, what he was doing. At that time, 68, 69, when I joined the movement, we were quite isolated from the rest of our movement. Except I used to go to New York because my parents lived there, so we went to New York. But New York was the big temple in the movement at that time, but they were completely isolated from everyone else also. So many creative things came up, especially when we got, some devotees would go to India, or had been to India, like Kirtananda Maharaj, at that time he was a Maharaj, and Harigriva, had they gone to India. And so some novel things came back. Some of our chanting was, we were going Shri Ram Jai Jai Ram, and it seemed, and then we had made up tunes, and we had all kinds of mantras we were singing. Gopala, Gopala. Anyhow, I don't want to kid. And then Prabhupada came to Buffalo in 1969, around April. He spent at least a week there, and he was able to observe us, and I spent, that was probably the most time personally I spent with Prabhupada alone, because there was only a few, we had a temple with around 5 devotees in it, which was quite a big temple at that time. But I was a student, so I was able to sit with Prabhupada for sometimes three hours or more every day, and he would just talk to me or if someone else was there. In any case, Prabhupada was listening to us chanting these, because we didn't know it was, we just chanted whatever we thought we were supposed to chant. And Prabhupada didn't directly tell us, but he told us through our temple president that these are not the mantras we're supposed to be chanting. He said, we just chant the mantras that we receive through disciple succession. So being rather, quote, innocent at that time, I mean, at least in spiritual life, we didn't question it. Why? Oh, I owe these mantras, it's so restrictive, Prabhupada's, no, we just followed it. At least in our temple we did. And there are many other things, the mantras that we were chanting, and then even one time when I was on Radha Damodar in 75, well, let me just say, when I first time I went to India, which was in 74, as far as I remember, it was 74, they had this, has anyone been to Mayapur? In Mayapur, if you go, there's a place called, where they have these dioramas in the temple in Mayapur. Did you ever see that? Where they have these dioramas now of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's pastimes. That was the whole temple room back there. That was the temple. They had the little Radha Madhava deities at that time. And when we got there, well, this was the first temple president's meeting. I was the temple president at that time. Somehow or another, the devotees who had been in Mayapur got this idea that part of the ecstasies during the kirtan is you bump into the devotees. That was a sign of ecstasy. And I remember I was there and the kirtan was going on. There wasn't 100 devotees, I think, went there, but devotees started to bump into me. I said, what's going on? This is ecstasy. It's ridiculous. Luckily, somehow or another that stopped. Otherwise, we didn't know very much, and I guess that was maybe they got some idea that this was Bengali ecstasy or whatever it was. But then another thing I remember is that when Prabhupada was in Buffalo, that Prabhupada, during one of the kirtans we had, because we were having programs at the university, Prabhupada got up and started to dance. And he was dancing, just the Swami step, because that's all we learned was the Swami step, back and forth. And if you look at the video, that's what Prabhupada, he got up, and you can see it wasn't, it's just a Swami step. All the devotees got up because it was ecstatic when you were with Prabhupada. I mean, the spiritual atmosphere was such that it was complete ecstasy. So Prabhupada got up, and everyone got up. Even one time Prabhupada got up, and he raised his hand, and all these old ladies who were sitting there, they got up also. because Prabhupada had so much transcendental potency. And he started to sway back and forth, and there's students there. And one of them remarked to me, he said that, wow, that old man, he dances so gracefully. So then, other times, as you can see, at Rath Yatra, you saw that, I'm sure you've seen that video where Prabhupada was, Lord Jagannath in the back, and Prabhupada's throwing flowers, roses to the crowd at the Rath Yatra. And then Prabhupada put up his hands and began to dance. I was distributing prasadam at that time. We had glubdams. They made like thousands of glubdams. And I was the temple president. I could have been there, but no one told me. But I just wound up distributing prasadam. It's thousands of glubdams. I was just one of the distributors. But anyhow, I saw Prabhupada dancing on the stage there. I was just struck with wonder. It was so beautiful. And then, of course, Prabhupada did do a little dance. He kind of twirled around with the Swami step. But you can see the devotees were just like completely went crazy. Jaitirtha Prabhu at that time, you can see he's just like completely, he gone wild. He just jumped up and down because of all the transcendental energy that was there. One time I brought 3 sets, I was a van leader at that time. I had this maxi van where I'm Radha Damodar. So Tamakrishna Maharaj asked me to pick up, I was in San Francisco with the devotees I was distributing books with. So he asked me to bring the devotees in this maxi van from San Francisco to LA and pick up 3 sets of Gaur Nitai deities. Now, if you've ever driven from San Francisco to LA, it's around 8 hours drive. And he told me, don't stop for anything. Of course, we had to stop for some things. So we picked up the deities, and then we drove from LA to Chicago, which I can't even remember, how many hours it must be at least, 3,000 kilometers or something, non-stop, from San Francisco to LA to pick up the deities and then drive them to Chicago, because Prabhupada was going to be there and he was going to do initiation with some of the Radha Damodar devotees. And he was going to install the 3 deities in the 3 buses we have at that time, Gaur Nitai deities. Interesting, when I arrived there, we had around 40 devotees with me or something, that packed into the maxi van with the 3 sets of deities. So I remember standing with Tamakrishna Maharaj when I arrived there. I thought, and I said, what should we do? He said, go out and book distribution. Right. I didn't always listen to every instruction I got. In any case, the time came for the installation. This is in the, what's the name? It wasn't the Lund Street Temple, it was the one near Northwest University, I forget where it is. Anyhow, it was a small temple, and the Prabhupada was sitting on the Vyasasan. We had 100 Radha Damodar devotees there. The 3 sets of deities were there. And Radha Damodar is, they were all brahmacharis. I mean, I was probably one of the older persons there. I was probably, this is in 75, so I must have been almost 24 years old, which was considered pretty old at that time. In any case, ecstatic meant you didn't bump into people anymore. You just twirled around. This whole thing where you grab their armpit and you swirl around and in front of Prabhupada. Show Prabhupada how ecstatic the devotees were. So Prabhupada, as soon as he saw that, he said, stop. He put up his hand, stop. He wasn't very impressed by our ecstatic dancing. And he just put up his hands like this from the Vyasasan and swayed back and forth. So that was Prabhupada's understanding. The Swami step wasn't, meant for the old fogies. Even the 19-year-olds or the 20-year-old devotees. Because, why is that? Because the whole aim is not, if you want to do acrobatics, there's plenty of other places to do it. the actual purpose of chanting and hearing is to put the atmosphere in such a way that you can actually become receptive to the holy name. And it takes a lot of sensitivity. The mode of passion, ignorance, is not the best entrance into the holy name. It's the pure goodness. As Prabhupada once wrote one time, he said the aim of our movement, he didn't write it, he said it, he said the aim of our movement is to spread the holy name and to make the atmosphere conducive so that people will be receptive to it. And when the holy name is there, then we have to become receptive to it. Otherwise we get too much absorbed in other things, and then the result is that we can't become actually listen with rapt attention. And Prabhupada said, when he was asked, how do you chant the Hare Krishna mantra? He said the first thing is pay attention and then try to feel Krishna's presence. And that pertains to everything, even Krishna's pictures, which are non-different from Krishna. If we pay attention to them, now we have the capacity to feel, we could also try to feel their presence. That's why a lot of people, they walk into our temple and they feel that there's something different there, because they haven't learned how to become too familiar. Oh yeah, it's another picture. Didn't feel anything yesterday. Today it's the same old picture. They're not so much conditioned or familiar. And they actually feel there's a different atmosphere in the temple. Why? Because Krishna and his associates are actually there. And sometimes they're more receptive than we are to their presence. But to chant the holy name, and then we have to put ourselves in such a position we can actually feel their presence. That Radha and Krishna and all their associates, the whole spiritual world, is there when we're chanting Hare Krishna. And it's possible that one can actually, if we have the right mood, the right consciousness, we can actually feel that Krishna is present. And gradually, as we feel Krishna's presence, then we can also remember something about Krishna, anything about Krishna. There are so many different forms of Krishna, there are so many different pastimes of Krishna, there are so many things, but something in relation to Krishna. That's called Krishna consciousness. And if we're not remembering Krishna, that's called Maya. You can't get any special credit for being in Maya in Krishna consciousness. Either we're Krishna conscious, either we're remembering something about Krishna, or at least trying to remember something about Krishna, or we're under the illusory energy. Maybe we're in goodness. I'm so good, I'm so sweet, I'm so nice. But we're in Maya, even in goodness. The natural position of the soul is to be in bliss. We're supposed to be in bliss, otherwise we're in Maya. We have a choice. If someone wants to be in Maya, that's an open choice. Everyone can be in Maya. We have a whole universe here of people in Maya to different degrees. Or we can be in Krishna consciousness. That's our choice. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has given us the gift of the chanting of the holy names, and if we become too familiar with them, we think, oh, it's the same old mantra, didn't work yesterday, can't work today, I'm immune to the Hare Krishna mantra. One of the offenses, we think it's an exaggeration, or we give an interpretation, and therefore we don't think it's really worthwhile even to listen with rapt attention. Why are they stressing so much rapt attention? Why is he saying we have to feel the presence of Krishna? Well, what did we join the Hare Krishna movement? What are we trying to feel? What are we trying to pay attention to? What is the purpose of our being here? If it's not to realize that Krishna and his name are non-different. And unless we learn the art of doing that, then we'll be missing on the point. For instance, in the spiritual world, it's not a free-for-all. If you want a free-for-all, this is the place to get it in the material world. Like one devotees we heard before, they joined the Hare Krishna movement because they didn't want to join an organized religion. don't go to the spiritual world if you don't want to join an organized religion. Because everything is very organized there. In spontaneous love, there's also quite a bit of organization. The love comes spontaneous, but the organization is quite specific. Krishna has his Astakali Lila, is that what it is? Astakali Lila. 24 hours a day, and you can read about it in Govinda Lilamrita and other such books. It's not that, for instance, when I was learning the harmonium, one of my somewhat mentors was Iyengar. So Iyengar, I asked him if he can teach me harmonium. He didn't really have so much time, but he gave me sheets of paper. What he was learning was the ragas. He gave me like 75 or 100 pieces of paper of ragas, and we went over the different ragas, Bhairava, and all these. According to a specific time of the day, you're supposed to chant these ragas. That in the spiritual world, they sing certain ragas at certain times of the day. And if you don't do that, they'll probably kick you out of the spiritual world because you don't belong there. Now, Prabhupada, of course, he introduced the Mangala prayers, the Guruvastaka prayers. I think we got them around 69, maybe a little bit later. And we didn't know what the tune was. As a matter of fact, as I said, we didn't even know how to do arti. I was the head pujari, which didn't mean very much at that time. But we didn't even know we didn't know what an arti was until we called up Rupanuga called up Brahmananda, who was traveling with Srila Prabhupada, and he said we did an arti. And they described the arti to Rupanuga with a fan, with some flowers and water. So I decided to do the first artik, and I didn't know how long it was supposed to take, so I did it for 2 hours. It was a very, very slow artik. Because, if you don't know how long it takes, you just, And what to speak of how to chant among the Guruvastaka prayers. We didn't have a book that would tell us what they were, what to speak of chanting them. The only chant we had was Narada Muni Bhajana Vina. It was on one of the records. Narada Muni Bhajana Vina Radhika. And we had Prabhupada's originally Happening album. Then we got that, and then we learned that actually there is a tune, like 5 years later or something. Actually Prabhupada would stop the devotees if they didn't sing the proper melody for the Mangalarti. Because devotees were always coming up, with with different melodies for the different, they just hear a melody and they just try to apply it. But every time when Prabhupada was there, he'd stop them and say what the Mangalarti melody was. I'm not quite sure if I got it. Samsara Dava Nanalita Lok. Because Prabhupada gave the melody, and you can hear it on his tapes for the morning, for the afternoon, for the evening Guruvastaka prayers. So in the spiritual world, every day, Purnamasi, along with Yogamaya, who's Yogamaya, along with Vrindadev and some other special personalities, they get together at Vrindakun, and they plan out Krishna's pastimes. It's not that Radha and Krishna just run out into the fields and just, it's a free-for-all. No, it's all planned out. And then Vrindadevi has a set of parrots. She sends them to the Vrindavan forest in order to decorate themselves appropriately for that particular pastimes, for those days, for that day. And so everything's nicely organized for Radha and Krishna's pastimes. It all fits in, and everything's perfectly done. No one feels everyone's desires are fulfilled because everything works as a natural harmony in the spiritual world. So, of course, we're not about to enter into that strict disciplinary arrangement, organization, because we're just too wild. We're just too much conditioned by so many different of our past. And as it explains here, that past is more or less our covering, our social conditioning, You know, you don't go from listening to Mick Jagger into singing bhajans overnight. You know, there's a tendency. When Prabhupada was here, he had to keep on putting us back into course, correct the course, because the devotees were always going off somewhere on a tangent. I remember one time I was on the Radha Damodar. I was actually a temple president at that time before I joined Radha Damodar. But Vishnu Maharaj and myself were friends because we lived together for some months when we opened a temple one time. So we went on what was called the road show. There was Kirtananda Maharaj and Vishnu Maharaj. They had this road show with Mangalananda. If you know who Mangalananda is, he put out this record called The Change of Heart. It was quite popular at that time. It was actually, and it was very successful because they were attracting literally dozens and dozens of young people to participate in our society. And they invited Prabhupada to one of the programs with Mangalananda. It was out in the country, and I went there. And they were doing their general thing, you know. Prabhupada once said that Mangalananda's songs were better than George Harrison's, and they were. If you ever hear, hey, you're not this body, just the spirit soul. The body's just a changing dress, meant to just grow old. You heard that before? O Govinda, within my heart, celestial herdsman, lotus-eyed one. Your precious gifts of love impart, O you who stand behind the sun, you're the one. So they were very nice songs, and Prabhupada was there, and I thought, wow, this is fantastic. I even, you know, the hippies were falling out of the tree, you know. And I thought, well, Prabhupada's really going to love this. And the next thing I heard is Prabhupada's secretary comes by and says, Prabhupada was very disturbed. He said, this has to stop. He said, we're not hippies. And that was the end of the roadshow, and I was like shocked. It was the most successful program that was going on for making young people in our society. And just, you know, after Prabhupada comes as a visitor to hear it, he nixes the whole thing. He stops the whole thing. So we're very creative. And we don't like the same old thing all the time because we don't really appreciate, you know. Could you imagine Krishna, you know, starting to play his flute and all the gopis saying, oh, it's the same old flute. Why don't we get a, you know, guitar or something? But Prabhupada had to keep on course correcting us all the time because we're quite inventive. And even, you know, I mean, from the very beginning of our movement, that was the problem wasn't so much, we didn't have guru problems at that time because we only had one guru who happened to be perfect. So there was no politics about the guru. I mean, there were politics about the guru, but they got solved quite quickly. But Prabhupada had to keep on constantly correcting our imaginations that were going on. In any case, my point is that we should try to organize our lives in such a way as we become receptive to the holy name. Which means, like for instance, the ragas in the morning are quite soft. They're quite peaceful. And the ragas in the evening are also quite peaceful because we're about to go to sleep. Otherwise we'd be going to sleep. Hare Krišna. So there's the whole Ayurveda deals with the different times of the day and the atmosphere that's created by the movements of the sun and the moon. They actually change the whole atmosphere. If you ever notice that in the morning, after the sun comes up, there's movement going on, but it's kind of subtle movement. That's the time to evacuate, to get up, to change from sleep into wakiness, but it's subtle. It's not you wake up, it's much more likely, you know, you wake up, oh, Hare Krishna, you know, you offer, You wake up and gradually your consciousness comes and you remember where you are and you're supposed to be Krishna conscious. And then it comes into the Mangalarti, which is like, it's supposed to be peaceful. It's not like you woke up, you're peaceful, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, and then Mangalarti, hey Krishna! And then japa time, oh, the voice is exhausting, Hare Krishna. No, the whole idea is to flow with the energy. The time of the day, the awakening comes up, you're gradually waking up. The sun gets in the fullest, that's when the mind wakes up. That's when the intelligence wakes up. That's when you can actually, the fire of pitta is highest. Digest your food, digest with your intelligence, understand things more clearly. And then gradually, kapha comes in and it's time to get active. Maybe exercise or something, go for a walk. And then gradually night comes, and from kapha it comes into pitta, and you're winding down. Pitta is from 10 to 12. And so digestion is going on when you're sleeping. Your mind is peaceful, and digesting even thoughts called dreams. If you don't eat too much, then the previous food is digested peacefully at night. So it's pitta nighttime, and then gradually day comes, vata comes, and you wake up again. So if we flow with the energies and we flow with the time, so it's not that there's some conflict between the flow of the universe that we're in now and devotional service. It's all made. Krishna actually wakes up in the morning eternally, and he goes through his pastimes. He gets bathed and dressed by his friends. He goes and milks the cows. He takes breakfast. He goes out herding the cows. Everything is arranged very nicely in a flow, eternal flow, in harmony with the energies. And the same thing, because we're living in a place where there's seasons, there's time, and everything flows very naturally. And if we're in harmony with the flow, then our mind becomes very peaceful, and then when our mind is peaceful, we can actually hear with attention, because we have nothing else to do, and actually we become more sensitive to feel Krishna's presence. And then we can gradually, when we feel Krishna's presence, and feel the ecstasy, the happiness at least, the pleasure from Krishna's presence, then gradually his forms, his quality, his associates, his pastimes will come spontaneously. That's called Krishna consciousness. And if we're working against the flow, and we find, why is it so difficult to hear with attention? Because we just spent 23 hours working against the flow, and now we're sitting down there and we're getting the reactions. Reaction means we're getting all the thoughts, all the disturbance. The prasadam I didn't digest yesterday is sitting there, waiting to digest. I'm tired because I couldn't sleep at night. My mind is full of all kinds of thoughts about, past, present, future, and not necessarily in Krishna consciousness. And I'm sitting there trying to Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. And we're going against it's difficult. We can hardly hear the name. Like Prabhupada didn't like a whole lot of instruments either, because he wanted us to hear the name. He would just want mridanga and kartals. Why? It's not that he was against music, but if the sound is the mridanga and the kartals are so loud, the wampur, bam, 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 then why bother chanting? Just, hopefully the wampurs will bring you back to God. We won't be able to hear anything else but bam, 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 bam. I remember going to when I went to New Vrindavan in 1969, in April that year to see Srila Prabhupada. It was a little temple room around half the size of this. The whole building where everyone was living was half the size of this room here. And we walked in, and Hari Griva and Kirtananda had brought their gongs they got from India. And they were doing the Gaur Arti song, what they thought was a Gaur Arti song, which is kind of like they didn't quite get the whole words down properly. But anyhow, I walked in, and the gong, if you've ever been to India, during when these Radha Damodar temple, when they're doing the Arti, And the pujari is going, bang, bang, gang, bang. They're not singing, they don't even sing, they don't even bother chanting Hare Krishna. The arti is bang, bang, bang. That was going on. I was thinking, oh my God, Krishna, save me. They were trying to sing something like Gaura Arti, but it wasn't quite it. But all I can remember is being shocked by the bang, bang, bang. It's kind of like construction work going on or something. So it's not that the music's supposed to drown out the Hare Krishna mantra, that you don't even hear it. You can't even hear your own brain when, you know. Like yesterday, during some of the bhajans, as these Mataji were singing, for instance, you know, I could actually hear myself singing, and I could hear them sing, which was like quite a relief, you know, because otherwise sometimes I'm trying to chant, I can't even hear myself chanting. There's so much sound going on. So we should hear ourselves chanting, we should hear everyone else chanting, and it should be sweet. It should be, you know, we should actually walk away blissful. And we should remember Krishna, that actually we chanted the Hare Krishna mantra, and the result is that we remember Krishna, and we slept about Krishna at night. We dreamed about Krishna. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions or comments?
So I will have a question.
Okay.
How to set up all the artists? Hare Krishna. Actually, how to set up the environment when bhajans are on and many devotees play instruments on different locations, and you get in this what you just described it before.
How to do it? Well, Prabhupada had the authority, he could do it. If someone else tried to do it, there'd probably be a fight outside. Not everyone would appreciate it. Not everyone would understand it. It takes some... And the problem is in the future, when after Prabhupada's disciples leave this planet, and you know, they even have Prabhupada, you know, his example on the videos, whatever, but you know, Prabhupada becomes just one of the other spiritual masters in our movement. You know, he has some other title, the founder Acharya, but it's not really so significant because we have a whole line of teachers coming down that teaches something completely different. How to do it? I guess that's why I'm giving the class. It's probably, even this class is probably quite controversial. Even repeating what Prabhupada said, even in Prabhupada's movement sometimes becomes controversial and not appreciated by everyone. But, you know, that's why one time Prabhupada said that he wrote me a letter. I sent him some Lakshmi, because I was the treasurer also, for his book fund. Every time we distributed a blue Bhagavad Gita that we had at that time, I'd send him the money for it. So he wrote me back, he said, thank you very much for this contribution of love, that we're all the servants. If there's any credit goes for this, it doesn't go to me, it goes to my spiritual master. That we're all servants of Krishna working in disciple succession. So please study all these books that I've written, and somehow or another, and afterwards, he said, afterwards, you'll have to help carry on the disciple succession. So that's our business, is to carry on the disciple succession. And if we think something is valid that's not in our, you know, that Prabhupada didn't say, Prabhupada didn't do, I mean, there's room for creativity also. It's not that we're completely, you know, but we should see that. Is it actually helping myself absorb my mind in Krishna? Is it actually helping me serve the spreading of the Hare Krishna movement? I mean, if we examine Prabhupada, his preaching, his activities, his daily schedule, everything was perfect. So it's a good, there's no harm in following Prabhupada. And if there's any question, then we can see. Just pray to Krishna, get intelligence. Whether or not this is the most conducive for for my Krishna consciousness and for others' Krishna consciousness. And then Krishna will help because he's this original spiritual master. And then we can see, you know, whether it's within the realm of Prabhupada's instructions and his example also. As far as what goes on practically, I mean, I may be the GBC in different areas, but the GBC doesn't mean you become all-powerful. People don't, you know. Prabhupada was very careful also, to a certain extent, and how he disciplined or how he instructed even his disciples. Many times he would not instruct them directly. He had his disciples instruct his other disciples because he didn't want to spoil his relationship with the devotees. Because people get, if you instruct someone, you think, or officially they're supposed to be your disciple or your follower or whatever else, and they don't really feel that internally, or they only feel that internally to a certain extent, and you give them an instruction which is not, you know, which hurts their feelings or disturbs their mind, they'll become resentful that you agitated their mind, you caused them some pain. And therefore your relationship with them to a certain extent will be spoiled. And if you're on Prabhupada's level, then Prabhupada's, you know, if anyone resented Prabhupada, they get into a lot of trouble. Prabhupada didn't want that. That wasn't the purpose of his mission. So Prabhupada was expert because he was in line with the Super Soul. He was a perfect instrument. Therefore he handled everything very carefully. And what to speak of the poor authority, myself as an authority, for instance, how much influence do we actually have before we overextend our authority and we wind up fighting with people rather than helping them. So things have to be done very carefully. Anyhow, when you're giving class, you can say anything which is bona fide. And usually people don't, you know, like to hear the instructions. They don't come to class anyhow because they don't like what you probably were going to tell them. So there's usually no problem. And if it was recorded and they don't like it, they don't listen to the recording, so there's no problem. All right, thank you very much. Khwala, Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavad, 8 Nectar of Instruction, Ki Jai, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaur Premanand.